Jake Morrison walked through the crowded streets of Station Helios 7 with his friend Danny by his side. The space station was huge, with aliens from every corner of the galaxy moving through its corridors. Jake had been a soldier for 10 years, fighting in wars across the stars. Now he was on leave, trying to relax and forget about the battles he had seen. Danny wanted to explore the station's darker areas, the places where legal things ended and illegal things began. Jake wasn't sure it was a good idea, but Danny insisted it would be interesting. They walked through narrow hallways until they reached a large room filled with noise and strange smells. It was an auction house. Jake had heard about places like this. Here people bought and sold things that weren't supposed to be bought or sold. Rare animals, stolen artifacts, and sometimes even intelligent beings who had no legal protection under galactic law. The room was packed with buyers from different planets. Some had 4 arms, others had scales or fur. They all looked wealthy and bored, like buying illegal goods was just another normal day for them. Jake felt uncomfortable being there, but before he could suggest leaving, he saw something that made him freeze. In the center of the room, inside a large cage with energy bars, was a dragon. She was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Her scales were blue and green like ocean water, shimmering under the harsh lights. She was at least 12 feet tall, even though she was crouched down low. Heavy chains wrapped around her neck and legs, keeping her from moving freely. But what made Jake's heart hurt was the look in her eyes. They were amber-colored like warm honey, and they were filled with exhaustion and sadness. Jake had seen that look before, in the mirror after bad battles, in the faces of soldiers who had lost too much. It was the look of someone who had given up hope. Under her wings, pressed against her body, were 5 small shapes. Baby dragons, each about the size of a cat. They were shaking with fear, their tiny scales pale and soft. The mother dragon kept her wings wrapped around them protectively, even though she was chained and helpless. An alien with 4 arms stepped up to a platform. He was the auctioneer, a Vexian who smiled like he enjoyed selling living creatures. His voice boomed across the room. Lot 47, 1 adult dragon female about 200 years old. Includes 5 baby dragons born 6 weeks ago. Perfect for guard duty, fighting pits, or exotic collections. Starting bid is 15,000 credits. Jake felt sick. Dragons were intelligent. Everyone knew that, even if the Galactic Council refused to officially admit it. They could think and feel just like humans could, but because they weren't legally recognized as intelligent beings, they could be bought and sold like property. 15,000, shouted a large trader near the front, and 20,000, called another voice from the back. Jake watched as the mother dragon looked across the crowd. Her eyes were searching, looking at each face as if trying to find someone who might help. Then her gaze locked with Jake's. For just a moment, they stared at each other. Jake saw the desperate plea in her eyes. She was begging for help, for mercy, for someone to care. Danny grabbed his arm. Jake, we should leave. This is wrong. I shouldn't have brought us here. But Jake couldn't move. He kept thinking about his own mother. After his father died, she had worked 3 jobs to keep their family together. She went hungry so Jake and his sisters could eat. She never gave up even when things were impossible. This dragon mother was the same. Even chained and defeated, she was still trying to protect her babies. 30,000, someone yelled. Jake pulled out his personal data pad. He looked at his bank account. 42,000 credits. It was every penny he had saved in 10 years of military service. He had been planning to buy land on New Montana, a colony planet where he could build a ranch and finally have a peaceful life. That money represented his entire future, his dreams, his retirement plan. One of the baby dragons made a small, frightened sound. The mother pulled her wings tighter around them. 35,000, the large trader called out. Jake's thumb hovered over his data pad. His mind raced. If he spent this money, he would have nothing. No savings, no future ranch, no security. He would have to start over from zero. It was stupid. It was crazy. Danny was right that they should just leave. 35,000 going once, the auctioneer announced with a smile. Jake thought about what it meant to be human. Not the species, but the idea. Humans were known across the galaxy for doing unexpected things, for choosing kindness even when it was hard, for helping others even when it cost them everything. That's what made humans special. That's what made them heroes in so many stories. Going twice. Jake made his decision. 42,000 credits, he shouted. His voice was steady even though his heart was pounding like a drum. The entire auction house went silent. Every head turned to look at him. Even the auctioneer looked surprised. A human soldier, spending that much money on a dragon and her babies. It didn't make sense to them. 42,000 from the human, the auctioneer said, his voice excited at the unexpected profit. Going once, going twice, sold to the human soldier. Danny stared at Jake like he had lost his mind. What did you just do? That was everything. Your whole life savings, your ranch, your future. Jake watched as station workers began processing the sale. The chains were being transferred to his ownership. The mother dragon's eyes met his again. This time, instead of desperation, he saw something different in those amber eyes. He saw hope. I know what I did, Jake said quietly to Danny. I made a choice. As the workers prepared to move the dragon family, Jake walked closer to the cage. The mother dragon watched him carefully, still protecting her babies. She didn't know if he was going to be cruel or kind, if he was going to hurt them or help them. Jake spoke softly, even though he didn't know if she could understand human language. My name is Jake. I don't know if you can understand me, but I want you to know something. You're safe now. I'm not going to hurt you or your children. I promise. The dragon tilted her head slightly, studying him with those intelligent eyes. One of the babies peeked out from under her wing. It had silver-colored scales that caught the light. It made a curious chirping sound before the mother gently pushed it back under her wing. Jake had no idea what he was going to do next. He had no plan, no home prepared for dragons, and no money left. He had just made the most impulsive and expensive decision of his life. But as he looked at that mother dragon and her 5 scared babies, Jake knew one thing for certain. He had done the right thing. Sometimes being human meant choosing compassion over common sense. Sometimes it meant giving up everything for strangers who needed help. The workers finished the transfer papers and opened the cage. The dragon family would be moved to a transport ship heading back to Earth. Jake's whole life had just changed in a single moment. Danny shook his head in disbelief, but put his hand on Jake's shoulder. You're either the bravest person I know or the craziest. Maybe both, Jake smiled a little. Probably both. As they led the dragon family out of the auction house, Jake walked beside them. The mother dragon kept watching him, trying to figure out who this human was and why he had saved them. The babies huddled close to their mother, still frightened but sensing that something had changed. Jake didn't have his ranch anymore. He didn't have his savings or his carefully planned future, but as he walked through those corridors with his new responsibility, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like he had done something that truly mattered. Jake stood in the cargo bay of the transport ship called Meridian. He watched as workers from the station moved the dragon family into a large holding area. The space was designed for cargo and animals with metal walls and cold floors. It wasn't comfortable, but it was the best option available for the 3-day journey back to Earth. The mother dragon kept her body wrapped around her 5 babies, even after the workers removed most of the chains. She didn't trust anyone yet. Why would she? Humans and other species had captured her, chained her, and tried to sell her children. Jake understood that trust would take time. Danny stood next to Jake, still processing what had happened. He kept shaking his head and muttering under his breath. I can't believe you actually bought them. 42,000 credits. Your entire life savings gone in one moment. I know, Jake replied simply. He didn't try to explain it again. Danny either understood or he didn't. The ship's captain approached them. His name was Pete Walker, an older human with gray hair and a weathered face. He had been flying transport ships for 30 years and had seen everything. He carried a datapad with official forms that needed signing. Sergeant Morrison, I need your signature on these documents. They're for exotic creature transport. Regulations require it, Pete said in a gruff voice. Jake took the datapad and read through the forms quickly. They were standard legal documents that said he was responsible for the dragons during the journey. He signed where indicated and handed it back. Captain, is there any way to make the holding area more comfortable for them? Maybe some padding on the floor or heat lamps? Something to make it feel less like a prison, Jake asked. Pete raised one eyebrow. Most people just keep creatures like this sedated during transport. Easier that way. No fuss, no mess. Jake felt anger rising in his chest but kept his voice calm. She's not a creature. She's intelligent. They're living beings who can think and feel. I won't have them drugged. The captain studied Jake for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll see what we can find in storage, maybe some thermal blankets and padding material. But you're responsible for feeding them. We have synthetic meat in the stores. Should work for carnivores. Thank you, Captain, Jake said with genuine gratitude. After Pete left, Jake slowly approached the holding area. The mother dragon watched him with those sharp amber eyes. Her wings were still spread over her babies, protecting them from this new threat. Jake crouched down to make himself look smaller and less dangerous. Hey there, he said softly. I'm Jake. I know you probably don't understand my words, but maybe you can understand my tone. I want you to know something important. You're safe now. I'm not going to hurt you or your children. That auction, those chains, that life is over. I'm going to take care of you. The dragon tilted her head slightly, watching him carefully. She was trying to read him, to figure out if he was telling the truth or lying. Jake stayed still, letting her observe him. One of the babies, the one with silver-colored scales, poked its head out from under its mother's wing. It was braver than the others, more curious about this strange human who spoke in gentle tones. It chirped softly, a sound like a question. Jake smiled. Hey, little one. You're a brave kid, aren't you? The mother dragon made a low rumbling sound. It wasn't quite a growl, but it was clearly a warning. The baby immediately ducked back under her wing. She wasn't ready to let her children near him yet. Jake understood and backed away, giving them space. Over the next 3 days, Jake spent almost every free moment in the cargo bay. He brought them food 3 times a day. The synthetic meat came in large chunks that looked unappetizing to Jake, but Captain Pete promised it was nutritious for carnivorous species. The mother dragon was suspicious at first, sniffing the food carefully before eating. But hunger eventually won. She ate carefully, always making sure her babies got their share first. Jake talked to them constantly while they ate. He told them about Earth, about the mountains and oceans and forests. He told them about his childhood in Montana, about growing up on his grandfather's farm. He talked about his dreams of having his own ranch someday, though that dream was gone now. He didn't know if the dragon understood any of it, but talking seemed to calm both of them. On the second day, Captain Pete and some crew members brought padding and thermal blankets. Together with Jake, they made the holding area more comfortable. The metal floor was now covered with soft material, and heat lamps created warm spots where the dragons could rest. The temperature was adjusted to be warmer, more like a natural cave environment. The mother dragon watched these improvements with interest. She seemed to understand that Jake was trying to make things better for her family. That night when Jake came to check on them, she had relaxed enough to lie down fully. Her babies were curled up against her, sleeping peacefully for the first time since the auction. The silver-scaled baby continued to be the most curious. Whenever Jake visited, it would peek out and watch him. On the second day, while its mother was sleeping, the little dragon ventured out completely. It approached the barrier of the holding area, tiny claws clicking on the padded floor. Jake was sitting nearby, eating his own meal. He stayed very still, not wanting to scare the brave little one. You're quite the explorer, aren't you? So curious about everything. The baby tilted its head exactly like its mother did. Then it made a soft trilling sound, almost like it was trying to communicate. I'm gonna need names for all of you, Jake said thoughtfully. Can't keep calling you the silver one forever. How about Ash? Your scales shimmer like moonlight on ash. Do you like that name? The baby chirped again, louder this time. It almost seemed like agreement. Ash it is then, Jake decided with a smile. By the third day, Jake had names for all 5 babies. Ash was the curious silver one. Amber had reddish highlights on her scales and seemed protective of her siblings. Storm was the biggest, with dark blue scales like thunderclouds. Mist was the shyest, with pale gray scales always hiding behind the others. Sky had bright blue scales like a clear day and seemed fascinated by everything. The mother dragon had also started to relax around Jake. She no longer growled when he approached. She allowed him to come closer to the holding area. Once, when Jake was sitting near the barrier reading a book on his datapad, she moved to sit near him. Not touching, but close. It was progress. Jake read aloud from the book, a collection of Earth poetry. He didn't know if she liked it, but she seemed to listen. Her eyes would follow the sound of his voice, and her breathing would slow to a calm, steady rhythm. On the evening of the third day, something remarkable happened. Jake was sitting outside the holding area as usual, and all 5 babies had come out to watch him. They were getting braver, more comfortable in his presence. The mother dragon watched from behind them, always alert but no longer tense. Ash approached the barrier and pressed his small snout against it. He was trying to get closer to Jake. The other babies followed his example, each finding a spot near the barrier. The mother dragon observed this for a moment. Then slowly, deliberately, she stood and walked to the barrier herself. She lowered her massive head and gently touched it to the energy field, right where Jake was sitting on the other side. It was a gesture of acknowledgement. Maybe even trust. Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a chance." The dragon made a sound deep and rumbling that vibrated through the air. It wasn't threatening. It almost sounded affectionate. The next morning, the Meridian docked at Earth Station. Jake had spent the night making arrangements. Danny, despite his initial shock, had agreed to help. They had found a place called the Rocky Mountain Exotic Sanctuary in Colorado. It was run by a woman named Lisa Chen, who specialized in rehabilitating rescued alien creatures. Jake had contacted Lisa from the ship, explaining the situation. She had been surprised but willing to help. "Bring them to the sanctuary," she had said. "We'll figure this out together." As workers prepared to transfer the dragon family to a ground transport, Ash pressed against the barrier again. His bright eyes looked directly at Jake, and Jake could have sworn he saw understanding there. "Don't worry, buddy," Jake said quietly. "This is just the beginning. We're going to find you and your family a real home, a safe place where you can grow up without fear." Ash chirped in response, a sound that somehow seemed hopeful. Captain Pete approached Jake one last time before they disembarked. "That's quite a family you've got there, Morrison. Not many people would have done what you did." "Maybe not," Jake agreed, "but someone had to." As the dragon family was moved into the transport vehicle, the mother dragon kept her eyes on Jake. She had learned to recognize him, to trust him. Her babies had already bonded with him in their own way. Jake climbed into the transport vehicle to accompany them. Danny got in too, still shaking his head but supportive nonetheless. The journey to Earth's surface began. Jake sat near the dragons, and Ash immediately moved as close as he could, pressing against the divider that separated them. The other babies did the same, seeking comfort from the one human who had shown them kindness. Jake looked at the mother dragon. "We're going home," he said simply, and somehow impossibly it felt true. The Rocky Mountain Exotic Sanctuary sat on 300 acres of beautiful wilderness in Colorado. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks covered with snow even in summer. Pine trees filled the air with their fresh scent, and a river ran through the property. It was peaceful and isolated, far from cities and spaceports. Lisa Chen met them at the main gate. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and hands weathered from years of working with animals. She had been running the sanctuary for 20 years, rescuing and rehabilitating alien creatures that had been abused or abandoned. But she had never worked with dragons before. "You must be Sergeant Morrison," she said, shaking Jake's hand firmly. "Danny told me about your purchase at the auction. A dragon mother with 5 babies. That's definitely a first for us." Jake climbed out of the transport vehicle. "Thank you for agreeing to take us in on such short notice. I didn't know where else to go." Lisa walked toward the transport, peering inside at the dragon family. The mother dragon stared back at her, protective and wary. "Dragons are special, Jake. Everything we know suggests they're not just smart animals. They're truly intelligent beings like you and me. They think, they feel, they remember everything. The trauma that Mother has been through, her babies have absorbed all of it." "I understand," Jake said seriously. "That's why I need your help. I don't know how to care for them properly." Lisa had prepared a large enclosure specifically for the dragons. It had both open space for the babies to run and play, and cave-like structures where they could hide and feel safe. There was a natural hot spring that bubbled up from underground, creating warm pools of water. Tall trees provided shade, and the fencing was designed to keep others out rather than keep the dragons in. Over the next few days, they carefully moved the dragon family into their new home. The mother dragon, whom Jake had started calling Azure because of her beautiful blue-green scales, explored every inch of the enclosure. She was checking for dangers, for escape routes, for anything that might threaten her babies. Only after she was satisfied did she allow her children to explore. Jake took emergency leave from the military to stay at the sanctuary. He wanted to be there during the adjustment period, to help the dragons feel safe. Every morning he would arrive at the enclosure with food. Every evening he would sit nearby and talk to them, continuing the routine he had started on the ship. The babies adapted to their new home quickly. They had space to run and play for the first time in their short lives. Ash was still the bravest, always the first to try new things. He would chase butterflies and investigate every rock and plant. Ember stayed close to her mother but watched over her siblings carefully. Storm loved the hot spring and would spend hours soaking in the warm water. Mist slowly came out of her shell, discovering that the world could be kind. Sky was fascinated by the trees and spent her time trying to climb them, preparing her muscles for the day she would fly. But it was Ash who formed the strongest bond with Jake. Whenever Jake entered the enclosure, Ash would run to him immediately. The little dragon would try to climb up Jake's legs, chirping excitedly. His tiny claws would scrabble for grip on Jake's pants until Jake would pick him up and hold him like a puppy. Lisa watched this bonding with great interest. "That little one has imprinted on you," she told Jake one morning as they observed Ash following Jake around the enclosure. "I've seen similar behavior in other intelligent species. They form attachments to those who show them kindness, especially during early development." "Is that normal for dragons?" Jake asked, gently scratching under Ash's chin while the baby made happy rumbling sounds. "We don't really know what's normal for dragons," Lisa admitted. "They've been hiding from galactic society for so long that we have almost no data on their behavior. But I can tell you this. What you're seeing is genuine affection. That baby loves you." Ash nuzzled against Jake's chest, making contented noises. Across the enclosure, Azure watched but didn't interfere. If anything, she seemed relieved that someone else was helping to care for her children. About a month after their arrival, something important happened. Jake was sitting near the hot spring one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in orange and pink. He was tired from a long day of helping to repair fencing, and his mind was wandering to thoughts of the future. His leave would end soon. He would have to return to military duty or make a permanent decision about his career. That's when Azure approached him directly for the first time. There was no barrier between them now, no chains, no walls. She could have hurt him easily if she wanted to. Instead, she walked up slowly and settled onto the ground right beside him. Jake held his breath. He could feel the heat radiating from her massive body. Her scales were warm from the sun. She was so close he could have reached out and touched her. Azure extended one of her large wings and gently draped it over Jake, creating a sheltered space around him. She wasn't quite touching him, but the gesture was unmistakable. It was protection. It was acceptance. It was trust. "Thank you," Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for letting me be part of your family." Azure made a deep rumbling sound that Jake could feel vibrating in his chest. It was a sound of acknowledgement, maybe even affection. Immediately, all 5 babies came running. Ash claimed Jake's lap as always, curling up like a cat. Ember pressed against his side, her warm body comforting. Storm flopped across his feet with a happy sigh. Sky perched on his shoulder, her small claws gripping his shirt carefully. Even shy Mist ventured close, settling near Azure's other wing. Lisa stood at the edge of the enclosure, watching the scene with tears in her eyes. "In 30 years of doing this work," she said quietly to Danny, who had come to visit, "I have never seen anything like this. That's not just acceptance. That's family." The peaceful days continued. Jake fell into a routine of caring for the dragons. He learned what foods they preferred, what games the babies liked to play, what made Azure relax or become alert. He started to understand their body language, the different sounds they made, the way they communicated with each other. But then Lisa came to him with troubling news. They were sitting in her office drinking coffee when she put down her cup and looked at him seriously. "Jake, I need to tell you something. The Galactic Council has been making inquiries about Azure and her family. Someone from the auction reported the sale to authorities. There are questions about whether dragons should be classified as intelligent beings or as exotic animals." Jake felt his blood go cold. "What does that mean?" "It means there's going to be an official investigation. If the council determines that dragons are truly intelligent, Azure and her babies could be granted citizenship and freedom. But if they decide dragons are just animals, then the sale might be ruled illegal. You could face charges for purchasing intelligent beings. Or worse, the dragons could be seized for scientific study." "I won't let that happen," Jake said firmly. Lisa reached across the desk and put her hand on his. Jake, you might not have a choice. The Council's authority supersedes Earth's laws. They can do whatever they decide is right. That night, Jake sat with the dragon family, his mind troubled. Ash sensed something was wrong. The little dragon, now much bigger than he had been at the auction, climbed into Jake's lap and looked up at him with concerned eyes. Then Ash did something that changed everything. Instead of his usual chirps and trills, he made different sounds. They were deliberate, intentional, shaped carefully. Jay, Ash said. Jay! Jake's heart stopped. He stared at the baby dragon in shock. Did you just say my name? Are you trying to talk? Ash concentrated hard, his small face scrunching up with effort. Jake who? Jake! Oh my God, Jake breathed. You're talking. You're actually speaking. Azure made a sound from nearby. It was a sound of approval. Jake looked at her and suddenly understood. She had been teaching them. She had known all along that they could learn human language. She had been waiting for the right moment, building trust, preparing them. Over the next week, Jake worked with Ash constantly. Lisa documented everything with cameras and recording equipment. The baby dragon was learning words at an incredible speed. He started with simple things: food, water, play, sleep. But then he moved to more complex ideas. Safe, happy, scared, family. The other babies watched and listened. Ember started trying to form words too. Within days, all 5 babies were attempting to speak. Some were better at it than others. Ember had the clearest pronunciation. Storm had a deep voice even as a baby. Miss spoke so softly you had to lean in to hear her. Sky talked constantly once she started, chattering about everything she saw. Jake was amazed and terrified at the same time. This was proof, undeniable proof that dragons were intelligent, but it also meant the investigation would be even more serious. The stakes were higher now. 8 days before the Galactic Council's investigation team was scheduled to arrive, Jake was explaining the situation to the dragons. He was telling them that some people might come and try to take them away. He promised he would fight for them, but he couldn't guarantee success. Ash listened carefully. His young face was serious, trying to understand the danger. The other babies huddled close, sensing the worry in Jake's voice. Then Ash looked up at Jake with those bright, intelligent eyes. The word Dad echoed in Jake's mind long after Ash had said it. He held the small dragon close, feeling the warmth of his scales and the steady beat of his heart. This wasn't just a rescued creature anymore. This was his son. The realization hit Jake with surprising force. Dad? Ash repeated, more confident now. He looked up at Jake with complete trust in his eyes. You are my dad. Jake's vision blurred with tears. Yeah, buddy, I am. I'm your dad. Lisa had recorded everything. Her hands were shaking as she reviewed the footage on her datapad. This changes everything, Jake. This is definitive proof that dragons are intelligent. Not just smart like dolphins or apes, actually intelligent. They can learn complex language, express abstract concepts, form emotional bonds. The next few days moved quickly. Jake contacted his commanding officer in the military, who then contacted Earth's official representative to the Galactic Council. The news spread fast. Within hours, media outlets across multiple planets were reporting the story. A human soldier had rescued a dragon family from an illegal auction. Now one of the baby dragons was calling him Dad. It was the kind of story that captured hearts everywhere, but not everyone was happy about it. The Vexian Traders Guild, the organization that had run the auction where Jake bought the dragons, filed an official complaint with the council. They claimed that Jake had knowingly purchased intelligent beings, which was illegal under galactic law. They demanded the sale be reversed and that Jake pay damages for violating trade regulations. 2 days before the investigation team was scheduled to arrive, Jake received an unexpected visitor. A military transport landed at the sanctuary, and out stepped Commander Helen Brooks from Earth Defense Command. She came with a full security team, looking official and serious. Sergeant Morrison, she said formally, though her eyes were kind. We need to talk about your situation. They sat in Lisa's office while the security team waited outside. Commander Brooks laid out the facts clearly and without emotion. If the Galactic Council rules that dragons are intelligent beings, you could face criminal charges for purchasing them. Even though your intentions were good, the law at the time was clear. Buying intelligent beings is slavery, and slavery is one of the most serious crimes in galactic law. Jake nodded slowly. I understand, ma'am. However, Commander Brooks continued, if the Council makes that ruling, Azure and her children would be granted immediate citizenship status. They would be free. They could go anywhere, do anything they wanted. They would have full legal rights. That's all I want, Jake said quietly, for them to be free. Commander Brooks studied him. Even if it means you go to prison? Jake thought about Ash calling him Dad. He thought about Azure trusting him enough to drape her wing over him. He thought about all 5 babies learning to speak, to laugh, to play without fear. Even then, he confirmed, their freedom is worth more than mine. The commander smiled slightly. The military is proud of you, Morrison. Whatever happens, know that. When the Galactic Council's investigation team arrived, they came in a large official ship. The team was led by Judge Kelvin Thross, a Zentari who stood nearly 8 feet tall. His skin was made of crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. He looked intimidating, but his voice was gentle when he spoke. With Judge Thross came representatives from 6 different species. There were scientists, lawyers, cultural experts, and observers. They spent hours at the sanctuary, watching the dragons, running tests, reviewing all of Lisa's documentation. The dragons were nervous at first. So many strangers, so many eyes watching them. But Ash, brave little Ash, stepped forward to speak with the investigators directly. Judge Thross crouched down to Ash's level. Hello, young one. Can you understand me? Ash nodded. His vocabulary was still limited, but he spoke clearly. Yes, I understand. You want to know if we think? If we smart? That's right, the judge said gently. Can you tell me about yourself? Ash took a breath, organizing his thoughts. That is Jake, he said, pointing with one small claw at Jake, who stood nearby. He save us. We at bad place, scared, chains hurt. People mean. Jake come to auction. He see us, he buy us. He break chains. He give food. He give safe place. He give love. Ember stepped forward then, her words a bit more advanced than her brother's. Mother teach us words. We always could think. Always could feel. Just too scared to show. Chains make us quiet. Fear make us hide. But Jake different, Jake kind. Jake make us brave. Even shy Mist found her voice, speaking in a whisper. We safe now. Because Jake, he our family. The investigation team watched and listened carefully. They tested the baby's language skills, their problem-solving abilities, their emotional responses. Every test showed the same thing. Dragons were not animals. They were people. Then Judge Thross asked to speak with Azure directly. The mother dragon stood before him, and when she spoke, everyone in the sanctuary fell silent. I am Azure, she said, her voice rough but clear after weeks of practice. I speak for my people, for all dragons. Please tell us your story, Judge Thross said. Azure took a moment, gathering her thoughts. We are old, very old. Older than your council. Older than your laws. We remember when stars were young. We watched the first ships fly between worlds. She paused, making sure everyone understood. We watched younger races grow. Some were good. Some were bad. We made choice. We chose to hide. We chose silence. Better to be thought simple animals than to be destroyed? Why would you be destroyed? Asked one of the scientists on the team. Because intelligence is dangerous, Azure explained. It makes others afraid. It makes them want to control us, to use us, to cage us. We saw what happened to other old races. They were conquered or eliminated. We chose survival. We chose to pretend we were beasts. Judge Thross listened carefully. But this human, Jake Morrison, he freed you. Why? Azure turned to look at Jake. Something deep and profound passed between them. Because he see truth. Not scales, not size, not beast. He see mother. He see fear. He see love for children. He see person. What do you want now? The judge asked. Azure's voice grew stronger. Freedom for my children. Freedom for all dragons who hide in fear. No more auctions. No more chains. We want recognition. We want respect. We want to live in peace. And what about Jake Morrison? Judge Thross pressed. He purchased you. Under the law, if you are intelligent, that purchase was a crime. Azure moved to stand beside Jake. Her massive form towered over him, but she was gentle as she positioned herself protectively. All 5 babies immediately clustered around Jake's legs, forming a defensive circle. He not commit crime, Azure said firmly, her voice carrying authority. He perform rescue. He save lives. He give everything for strangers. That not criminal. That hero. Ash looked up at the tall judge and added his own voice. That my dad, he good. He protect us. We love him. The other babies echoed the sentiment, each in their own way. Our dad. Our family. We stay together. The investigation team withdrew to deliberate. They spent 2 full days in discussion, reviewing evidence, debating law and ethics. Jake spent that time with the Dragon family, uncertain of what the future would hold. He had already been informed that regardless of the council's decision, his military career was essentially over. He had broken too many regulations, caused too much controversy. Any regrets? Danny asked when he came to visit one afternoon. Jake watched as Ash and his siblings played by the hot spring. Azure rested nearby, more peaceful than he had ever seen her. Sky was practicing small hops, preparing for the day she would fly. Storm was splashing in the water. Mist was drawing pictures in the dirt with her claw. Ember was organizing her siblings like a little general. Not one, Jake said honestly. Not a single regret. On the 3rd day, Judge Thross returned with the council's decision. News crews from dozens of planets had gathered outside the sanctuary. This wasn't just about one dragon family anymore. This was about how the galaxy defined intelligence, rights, and personhood. Everyone gathered in the sanctuary's main hall. Jake stood with the dragon family, Ash pressed against his leg for comfort. Azure stood tall and proud, ready to hear the judgment. Judge Thross spoke in a voice that carried authority and compassion. After careful consideration of all evidence, the Galactic Council has reached the following conclusions. He paused, letting the moment build. First, the species known as dragons are hereby officially recognized as fully intelligent beings. They possess self-awareness, complex language capability, abstract reasoning, and emotional depth. They are granted all rights and protections given to intelligent species under galactic law. A cheer went up from the crowd. Azure made a sound of triumph, a roar that shook the building. Second, Judge Thross continued, all existing contracts, sales, or ownership claims involving dragons are immediately nullified. Any dragon currently held in captivity must be released at once. The practice of buying or selling dragons is declared illegal and will be prosecuted as slavery. More cheers. Jake felt relief flooding through him. They were free. Truly free. Third, the judge said, his crystal face turning toward Jake. Regarding Jake Morrison, while his actions technically violated the law as it existed at the time, we find his intentions and the ultimate outcome to be extraordinary circumstances. No criminal charges will be filed. 6 months passed since the Galactic Council's historic decision. Those 6 months changed everything, not just for Jake and his dragon family, but for the entire galaxy. The Rocky Mountain Exotic Sanctuary had transformed into something far bigger than anyone imagined. What started as a simple refuge for one dragon family became the first official dragon embassy on Earth. Dragons from across the galaxy, who had been hiding in fear for generations, began to emerge from the shadows. They came to meet Azure, the mother who had been brave enough to speak for their entire species. They came to see the place where dragons could live freely and safely. Jake had accepted an honorable discharge from the military. His commanding officers understood that his path lay elsewhere now. They gave him a medal for valor and thanked him for his service. But more importantly, they recognized that what he did at that auction was more valuable than any military campaign. He had changed the course of history through one act of kindness. The sanctuary offered Jake a permanent position as head of security and dragon liaison. It wasn't the ranch in Montana he had dreamed about for so long, but as Jake watched dragons flying freely through the Colorado sky, as he heard their voices raised in song and laughter, he realized this was better than any dream he could have imagined. This was purpose. This was meaning. This was home. Azure had flourished in her freedom. The exhausted, defeated dragon from the auction was gone. In her place was a confident leader who spoke for her people with wisdom and strength. She had begun teaching classes on dragon history and culture. Scholars from dozens of planets came to listen to her lectures about ancient times, about the rise and fall of civilizations, about the secrets dragons had kept for millennia. It turned out dragons had witnessed some of the most important moments in galactic history. They remembered everything, and now they were finally sharing that knowledge. But for Jake, the greatest joy came from watching the 5 babies grow. They weren't babies anymore, not really. In 6 months they had grown considerably, though they still had years before reaching full maturity. Ash had become Jake's constant shadow. The silver-scaled dragon now stood as tall as Jake's waist and was still growing. He followed Jake everywhere, learning not just human language but human customs and emotions. Ash had developed a personality that was uniquely his own. He was curious about everything, brave enough to try new things and fiercely loyal to his family. He had also become something of a celebrity. News outlets loved to interview the dragon who had called a human his dad. "Dad, come see," Ash called one morning, his voice clear and excited. His language skills had advanced so much that he now spoke in complete sentences with barely any accent. Jake looked up from the security reports he was reviewing. "What is it, buddy?"
"Sky is finally flying."
Really flying, not just gliding. Ash practically bounced with excitement. Jake stood and followed Ash outside. Sure enough, Sky was soaring through the air above the sanctuary. Her bright blue scales caught the sunlight as she performed loops and spirals. She had always been fascinated by flight, and now she was the first of her siblings to master it. Her voice rang out in pure joy as she called to her brothers and sisters below. Ember watched from the ground, her protective nature making her cautious about flying. But Jake could see the longing in her eyes. She wanted to fly too, but she wanted to make sure it was safe first. That was Ember, always looking out for others before herself. She had grown into a natural leader among her siblings, organizing activities and making sure everyone was included. Storm, now the largest of the five, had discovered that he loved the water. He spent hours in the hot springs and had even learned to swim in the nearby river. Despite his impressive size and deep voice, Storm had the gentlest soul. He had befriended many of the other rescued creatures at the sanctuary. Jake often found him napping in a pile with various aliens who had no fear of the large dragon. Mist had overcome her shyness and found an unexpected talent. She was an artist. Lisa had given her paints and canvas, and Mist created beautiful murals all over the sanctuary. Her artwork depicted dragon history, family bonds, and dreams of the future. Museums were already asking to display her work. The shy little gray dragon who used to hide behind her mother was now expressing herself in ways that moved people across the galaxy. "Dad, watch this," Ash said, pulling Jake's attention back to the present. The silver dragon took a running start and leaped into the air. His wings spread wide, catching the wind. He wobbled a bit, not as graceful as Sky, but he stayed airborne. "I'm doing it! I'm flying!" Jake's heart swelled with pride. "That's amazing, Ash. You're a natural." Azure approached, moving silently despite her massive size. She settled beside Jake, and together they watched their children play and fly and explore. She had learned to speak human language fluently now, with only a slight accent that made her voice distinctive and beautiful. "They grow so fast," Azure said softly. "Soon they will not need me anymore." Jake looked at her in surprise. "They'll always need you. You're their mother, and you are their father," Azure replied, turning her amber eyes to him. "In dragon culture, we have a word. Kelvaresh. It means heart father. Not the one who gives life, but the one who gives love, who sacrifices, who protects even when it costs everything." She gently touched her snout to Jake's shoulder, a gesture of deep affection. "You are Kelvaresh to my children. You are family in the truest sense." Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You're my family too. All of you." Ember approached them, her reddish scales gleaming. "Group hug time," she announced, wrapping her wings around both Jake and Azure. Immediately, the other dragons swarmed over. Ash landed with a thump, nearly knocking Jake over in his enthusiasm. Storm lumbered over and flopped down beside them. Sky descended from above, adding her wings to the embrace. Even Mist emerged from her art studio to join the family huddle. Lisa stood at a distance, watching the scene with tears in her eyes. Danny was visiting that day, and he stood beside her. "You know," Danny said, "when I dragged Jake to that auction, I was just looking for something interesting to do. I had no idea it would lead to all this." Lisa smiled. "The best things in life are often unexpected." Jake didn't plan to become a father to 5 dragons. Azure didn't plan to become the voice of her species. But here they are, changing the galaxy one day at a time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jake sat with his family. They talked about their day, about Sky's flying achievements, about the mural Mist was working on, about the new dragons who would be arriving next week. "Dad," Ash said, settling his head on Jake's lap like he used to when he was small. "Do you ever miss your old life?" The military? The ranch you wanted? Jake thought about the question carefully. He had given up everything at that auction. His savings, his career plans, his carefully designed future. 6 months ago, he had been a soldier following orders and dreaming of a quiet retirement. Now he was a father, a teacher, a protector of dragons, and a small part of galactic history. You know what, Ash? I don't miss it at all. That life was about what I thought I wanted. This life is about what actually matters. What's that? Mist asked softly from nearby. Family, Jake said simply. Love, making a difference. I thought happiness was about having a peaceful place to retire. But real happiness is about having people you care about, and who care about you. It's about purpose and connection. Azure made a rumbling sound of agreement. Wise words for a young human. Hey, I'm not that young, Jake protested with a laugh. I'm 32. I am 217, Azure replied dryly. You are very young. The family laughed together, their voices mixing in harmony. Human and dragon, different species, but one family. As darkness fell, Jake looked up at the stars. Out there in the galaxy, other dragons were emerging from hiding. Some were finding their way to Earth. Others were claiming their rights on different planets. The auction house on Station Helios 7 had been shut down. Laws were being rewritten. A species that had hidden for generations was finally free. And it had all started because one human soldier saw a mother, dragon's eyes at an auction, and decided that some things were more important than money or plans or safety. Dad? Sky called from where she was perched on a tree branch. Tell us a story about Earth heroes. Yeah, Storm agreed enthusiastically.
Tell us about someone brave.
Jake smiled. All right. But you know what? I think we're living a better story than any I could tell you. We're writing our own story one day at a time. What's our story called? Ember asked. Jake looked at each of them in turn. Azure, who had trusted him when she had no reason to. Ash, who called him Dad and meant it with his whole heart. Ember, who protected everyone she loved. Storm, who showed that size and gentleness could coexist. Mist, who had found her voice through art. Sky, who embodied freedom itself. Our story is called Family, Jake said. It's about how strangers became family. How chains were broken. How love was stronger than fear. Ash snuggled closer. I like our story. Me too, buddy. Me too. As the night embraced them, the unlikely family settled in together. Azure's wings spread over them all, creating a space of warmth and safety. The babies dozed off one by one, tired from a day of playing and flying and growing.